Serious, travelers of Reddit, what are some of the creepiest, scariest experiences you've had abroad? On a train in Athens traveling alone, a group of men tried to push me off the train with them at a stop. 3 women started yelling at them and pulled me back. It happened too fast, I didn't know until the one that spoke English explained they were trying to take me. They made sure I made it back to the hostel and told me not to wear what I was wearing, shorts and a tank, while alone. I was traveling in Nicaragua several years ago when I got lost and ended up having to take a taxi at 9:30 p.m. back to my hostel. When the taxi pulled up to the curb, the taxi driver locked the taxi doors and told me that I had misunderstood the fare. He claimed I owed him $100, which was several times more than we had agreed upon. I tried to pry the doors open from the inside but was completely trapped. Thankfully, he let me out of the taxi after taking all the money I had on me. The hostel workers told me I was incredibly lucky. A few days earlier, a taxi driver had kidnapped another young female, assaulted her, then dumped her barely conscious body in a field outside town thinking that she was dead. A few local school children found her on their way to school in the morning. We went on a family trip to Croatia and on our way to the beach we pulled over to the side of a road for a pee break. So we opened the car door and like always our dog jumps out first. He ran into the field right next to the street. Then suddenly my mother starts screaming the name of our dog. Because 10 meters away from our car was sign that said, "Stay away, old minefield." Thankfully nothing happened. 1992 I was walking up the stairs to the ticket booths in the Warsaw, Poland Central train station. All of a sudden this dude is falling down the stairs coming to rest a few stairs above where I was standing. Dude had a long screwdriver sticking out of his abdomen. A good friend of mine in Zimbabwe was grabbed at gunpoint and forced into a van. Thankfully they only took her to an ATM and made her drain her account, then they left her somewhere outside town. Could have been so much worse. In India our bus rounded a corner in the mountains and another bus was on the other side of the curve. Both buses skid to a stop about 1 foot from one another. Both drivers started laughing and poking fun at each other. We saw a bus from the 80s that fell down the mountain about 15 minutes later. How intense. Hiking in Huaraz, Peru. Has been told to watch our gear as locals, and apparently foxes, might make off with items left around the campsite. So we made sure to clean the campsite extra well, packing all our gear in the tent and inside the fly, and after a long day hiking, off to bed. Middle of the night our tent starts shaking like crazy. I wake up freaking out thinking we were getting robbed. I started yelling and screaming. Part of the tent pushes in real far. I managed to get outside to start swinging and come face to face with a cow that had wandered into the tent ropes and got startled. Pretty lucky that it didn't step down into the tent and hit us. I was in Barbados walking on a main road back to where I was sleeping, not far from a main beach, on the south side. It was late and dark. I come across this man carrying a white bucket. "Hi, I'm Bush." Bush has plants in the bucket. He also has a machete. "Do you have any food for me? Some rice?" I tell him I do not have any food, but that I do have weed that I could share. I had bought some from a bunch of kids at the beach the night before. "Follow me," says Bush. So I follow this man with a machete off the road, into a empty lot. At the back of the lot is a back alley heading to the side. We take this alley. A man is sitting, sleeping on a wall. A few broken down cars are parked. It is a dead end. I was wondering earlier whether all this was a good idea, and my mind was beginning to form an opinion along the lines of no. So we get to the end of the alley. He enters a door and brings out 2 chairs. Turns out this is his mom's place. I begin to notice a small garden all around, made from the plants that Bush picks up and brings back in his bucket. We light up. He tokes first. He coughs. "Ugh. This stuff is it. You feed this to the sheep." My buddy and I were flying into Malaysia from Vietnam on the day that MH370 went missing. We were at the gate watching the whole thing unfold about it going missing. It was playing on virtually all the TVs in the airport. We were flying Malaysian Airlines. The tickets were expensive, for a backpacker's budget, and they weren't offering any refunds. Told ourselves that maybe they'd be extra cautious now, so we're actually more safe. Definitely puckered up for 2 hours until we touched down. I was traveling by van through the mountains in the Philippines with a friend that is a really big guy. We came up on a checkpoint with soldiers searching cars. The guys were all wearing mismatched clothes and did not have any insignias on their uniforms or trucks. They searched all of our bags and were asking questions of the driver in Tagalog, which we did not speak. We heard them say American and we were the only 2 Americans on the bus. They talked for a little while and finally waved us through. Later we told the story to another American and he said we had gone through a guerrilla controlled area where Americans had been kidnapped for ransom lately. They all agreed they did not take us because of the size of my friend. I think we got really lucky that day. Was on a flight once going into Orlando that hit some unexpected turbulence. This was no ordinary turbulence. We went from 0 to 100 in an instant. People literally flew out of their seats. Luggage fell from the overhead bins. People screamed like they were going to die. There were several sudden drops in elevation strong enough that people's arms flew up in the air and my butt came out of the seat. I've flown quite a bit and sometimes it gets bumpy. This was the first time I seriously thought something bad was going to happen. A cult behind several murders in China tried to recruit me for some reason. Got pickpocketed by a group of 3 on a Paris metro. I'm paranoid of losing my wallet, so I'm always checking myself. When I realized it was missing, I made a bigger scene than the pickpockets were making. They shoved me into their friend and were trying to convince people I knocked him down. I stopped the train from leaving the station. One of the other passengers left to get conductor and security. I guess that didn't sit well with the pickpockets, so they gave me back my wallet and took off running. Edit. This event still freaks my wife out. A friend and I were waiting for a night train in Naples and after someone tried to steal our bags decided to go everywhere together. It was a good thing because a man who had been whistling at us for an hour tried to follow us into the bathroom. Visiting Chicago from Seattle for a week. I booked an Airbnb with a gentleman understanding that I would be in a household with maybe 5 other people as he did bunk beds in the room. The Airbnb was marketed as close to trains, decent area, and the house looked clean with many useful amenities. Upon arriving at the house, I find that it's run down, unclean, with only the sheets being changed by the maid. On top of that, many appliances were broken and there was no potable water. That was the first strike. Next, there were upwards of 15 people staying in the house. That bunk bed situation? He had 5-6 rooms with varying amounts of bunk beds squeezed in and no room to walk. No one in the house knew about the other rooms from the listing. I dropped my things off to explore the city and noticed the neighborhood was a bit sketchy but thought nothing of it. When I came back there was one of the other guests sitting waiting for an Uber Eats because he was too terrified to walk down the street and get food. Apparently, the night before I arrived, 3 people in the house were mugged while walking 5 minutes from the train to the house. That night, 8 of us sat on the floor of the living room. Seemed like a small dining area but a lover's couch was placed in there with a broken TV, and heard 2 separate occasions of 8-10 gunshots a block away. I immediately moved to a hostel and argued with Airbnb and himself until I received a refund. Like, screw you. TLDR. Ended up in an Airbnb in a bad part of Chicago where 3 housemates were mugged and 2 people on the street were shot. Didn't stay another night. I have mostly traveled through Europe, and the only time I've ever really felt uncomfortable was when I was groped on the metro in Rome. We were packed into the car, and I felt a hand against my back. No big deal. I live in New York City. It happens. But then the hand slipped between me and the next person and around to near my stomach. Oh, maybe a pickpocket? Well, I had a money belt, so I was okay there. The hand grabbed my breast. We were so tightly packed that I couldn't turn around, and I just froze. I wanted to say, stop or don't or anything at all, but in the moment every word of my Italian fled from my brain and I felt like a bucket of scalding water had been dumped over my head. The ride felt like it lasted forever. At the next stop I forced my way out of the car and out into the fresh air. Rome is so beautiful, but it felt pretty damn ugly that day. I had a pack of wild dogs chase me from my bus stop to my hotel at 3 AM in Kosovo. I also had an old woman yell at me in Russian about not making my bed right on the train and then watched over my shoulder till it was to her satisfaction when I was on my way back to Bucharest from Moldova. The first day in the Philippines when I landed in Manila, a white Canadian tourist was beheaded by people who align with his, so there was that. The first time I ever visited the London Bridge was the day the terrorist attack happened where they drove a van through the crowd. It was my first time visiting New York City. My aunt and uncle, who both work in FD, Financial District, took the whole week off to show me and my family around Manhattan. It was a beautiful Tuesday morning and we just had our photos taken around Wall Street when the first plane crashed into the WTC. I was working in a poor community in a small village in Romania, helping to build a small extension to a school. At around dusk I decided to go for a short walk to the local shop for some water when a car drove past me. They suddenly braked and reversed down the road and stopped beside me, telling me to get into their car as they want to show me their cool things, radios, cars, knives. They kept slowly curb crawling me and demanding I got in the car until I got back to my group, whereby they sped off. For the next couple of days the same car, I believe, kept driving past and stopping outside where we were staying for 30-minute intervals several times a day, and I was staying a good hour away from the village. Creepy as all hell, and I still believe it could have gone badly. Edited for grammar. After being sexually harassed for a good half hour by a guy at Roma Termini, I boarded my overnight train just to wake up to the sight of a lovely red-eyed man in my door with the words "I'm from Morocco, do you want me?" eloquently leaving his lips as he proceeded to point to all the beds in the coupe and sitting next to me in the bed. I was staying in a weird hostel by myself in Barcelona. Woke up to a man staring at me while I slept. He was looking over one of those wood dividing screens that the shared room had. I pretend to still be asleep because I was afraid of what he would do if I moved or confronted him, and I didn't know if there was anyone else in the room. He stared for like 2 hours until finally my alarm rang cause I had to take an early train. So I put all my stuff in my bag and left the room. As I left I told the owner, but I was really in a hurry and didn't ask what he was going to do with the guy. What I've gotten from this thread is that being a woman is ducking scary. I witnessed a creepy old man groping a teenager on a crowded train in Osaka. The girl was just enduring it and you can tell that she was holding back her tears. I whipped my phone out and started filming the guy, which made him use his other hand, which was blocked from my view, so I asked my guy friend to switch places with the girl. After that, on the next stop, the creepy guy got off. I asked the girl if she was okay. She thanked us and her friends also expressed their gratitude. I think all of them, all teenage girls, were aware of the groping, but I read somewhere that it is not the Japanese culture to make a scene. I was aware that this kind of thing was prevalent in Japan, but I'm still shocked to see it in person. That creepy man and the poor girl's face will be forever etched in my mind. On the red-eye train, stopped for a layover in New York, my friend and I are half asleep, sitting across from each other. A homeless guy snuck into the train, pulled his pants and underwear down and tried to sit with my friend, encouraging her to help him out. I woke up just in time to see it happen. Took me telling the guide to find another place to sit for him to hurriedly pull his pants up and move somewhere else, only to try the same thing to another woman, who was extremely vocal about it. The cops spoke with us. Apparently this guy was known for stealing cans from the subways, and this was a new MO for the guy. I was stalked by a guy while walking through the Tiergarten in Berlin. I was walking a path, enjoying the park alone. I saw this guy standing on the edge of the walkway just looking off into the distance. I passed him, and when I was about 20 feet away, he turned and followed after me, keeping pace. I started to take a very meandering path, even leaving the park and entering again. The guy stuck with me the whole way. Eventually I got to a place with some sharp turns and heavy greenery. I was able to lose the line of sight and put myself up against a corner. I'd just been in Switzerland and had bought a pocket knife, so I opened the blade and held it inside my jacket pocket. I stood there, waiting, and then this guy comes walking out of the path, confused and obviously trying to see where I went. When he finally spotted me, he jolted, and since I had the drop on him, he played it cool and continued walking as if he hadn't followed me there. He stopped a little ways ahead, and I kept watching him. I wanted to confront him to find out why he'd followed me, but since I was a visitor in the country, I thought better of it. Instead, I waited until I saw a big group of people leaving and fell in with them. He started to follow me, but I finally lost him outside the garden. It unsettled me because to this day I have no idea why he was following me. I'm a guy and at the time I was in my early 20s, pretty fit, and had a sour disposition, so I didn't seem like a prime mugging target. But maybe he thought otherwise. Edit. Half the reason I posted this story was because I hoped someone on Reddit would know what the guy was doing. You didn't fail me. Met a guy in Munich on the street who had lived in the same house as I did, in Cincinnati, 40 years ago. I have to. 1. I was flying with my family as I was young, from Ft. Myers, FL to Detroit, MI on Christmas Eve, or maybe Christmas morning, and someone tried to set off a bomb in Detroit's airport. Fortunately they caught the guy before the bomb happened, but that was pretty scary to get around. 2. My friends and I were in the UK and we had met a group of guys from California. I'm from Michigan. We had fun and moved on. We were in the same floor of a hotel. Later we were in Sweden and we saw the same USO, so we were waiting at the base of a mountain to climb up. Booked the same guide by chance. Then we were in Greece. Now my friends and I were all young women and these guys, random Greek guys, start grabbing at us and pulling at us. It's the middle of a sunny day and we are almost being chased by these old men. No one is doing a thing. A car pulls up next to us and the guys try to shove us in. We start booking it the other direction and as we get to the corner, the California guys are there, again, by chance, which was enough to deter the Greek guys and we basically cried to them for about 2 hours before they walked us back to our hotel. The Cali guys and us ended up going to a beach together the next day. I never saw them again. Saw some refugees from North Africa beat up and stomp a guy to death at Rome Central Railway Station in the wee small hours while I was waiting for it to open to catch my 5:30 train to see my grandmother. I mean jumping on his skull until it popped like a watermelon. This was in the late 80s. I was walking to a pharmacy down a busy avenue in Rabat, Morocco. It was the Feast of the King, so most people had off work and school, meaning the avenue was empty. Myself and 2 volunteers, all 3 young, white females, are walking and chatting when 2 guys on a motorbike pass us the opposite way. They drove over the median and pulled up beside us. The guy on the back gets off and walks toward us, then pulls a machete out from underneath his flannel. Girl 1 throws her purse. Girl 2 throws her phone. And both go running. Guy comes after me and I wrap my hand around my purse. Had my passport, wallet, phone, etc. and he holds the machete up to my neck. I say a few choice words to him in Arabic, essentially shame on you by Allah, which is something I was taught by locals to keep the kids I was working with at an orphanage in line. Machete man promptly appears to his pants. He goes after the dropped phone and purse and I start running the rest of the way to the pharmacy. I wind up there crying and the other 2 girls meet me. People are starting to congregate. Some witnessed it while driving by while others are trying to translate for us. A woman says she will drive us home after speaking with the security guard at the pharmacy. We agree and get into a minivan. I provide directions in Arabic and the woman drives right past the house, blowing stop signs and ignoring traffic lights. It's then we realize we're about to get kidnapped. One of the 2 girls reached forward, opened the door of the van, and we jumped out while it was moving. TLDR. Held up at machete point, then almost trafficked in Morocco during my first international travel experience. I was traveling in Costa Rica with 2 flashy businessmen who were there to possibly purchase a gentleman's club. We were staying at the Radisson and asked the concierge to get us a cab to the club. We got in the cab and made sure that the driver knew where we were going. We were told it was a 10-minute drive. About 7 minutes in I realized that we were not in a touristy part of town at all. The driver is whispering into his phone in Spanish, staring at us in the rearview mirror. I get uneasy and look at my companions, who are clearly feeling the same way. We ask, are we almost there? OC. You know, memento. More whispering. Not good. We are being set up. It's been 10 minutes and we are in a sketchy residential area. I'm sitting in the middle and my partner opens his briefcase and hands me a pen and tells me to stab someone if I need to. What? He passes another pen to the other man. He's sitting directly behind the driver and takes his own gold pen and holds it to the driver's jugular and screams, "Take US back to the Radisson right ducking now." The partner snatched the driver's phone and hangs up. I'm just clutching the pen. We did make it back to the Radisson. Jewelry was deposited into the safe in the room for the rest of the trip and we eventually made it safely to the club. I was young and naive. I had had my passport for 3 days at this point and didn't really get that we shouldn't have been traveling there with that amount of flashy jewelry. Went to Honduras. Nearly drowned in a sea of children begging for money. Also the wife and I went out into the ocean. She was on a paddle board and I on a canoe. She couldn't paddle back in and it was taking her out so she had to hold on to me while I paddles us in. Good thing I was in really great shape at the time. Being cornered by a group of men and one of them practically begging me to go down on him. Getting followed, mugged and sexually assaulted while living abroad at 9 AM on my morning croissant run was pretty scary. Ugh. I went to visit Ukraine with my parents because they wanted to see the small villages where their parents were born. We have no family in the area so we hired a guide to take us around since the country can be a bit corrupt. As we were driving around on a highway we suddenly were stopped in traffic, literally middle of nowhere. The guide gets out of the car and takes a look, then quickly jumps back into the car, does a U-turn and drives off telling my mom we can't go to her mom's village. We ask why and he says that was some kind of Russian militant roadblock. This was during the whole Crimea thing. I was on a volunteer trip to Guatemala and we took a day trip to see some Mayan ruins on a small island. My friend and I were looking for a bathroom and several locals pointed us in the direction of one at the top of the mountain. We found a small building with no door and one toilet. My friend says I can go first and she'll stand watch. I start going about my business when I hear my friend saying that I should hurry up and then I hear a man's voice shouting something in Spanish about permiso. Out of nowhere he barges in while I'm mid-pee pointing a very large gun at me. He had some sort of uniform on so he may have been police but I'm not sure. I pull up my pants, completely paranoid, grab my friend, tell the man lo siento over and over and run as fast as I can down the hill. He was shouting after us but didn't follow. Although nothing happened I was terrified and my poor friend still had to pee. Gypsies in Romania tried to, what I can only assume, sell me a baby. The woman, who looked like she was using since the day she first saw light, kept a one-sided haggling conversation in her own language all the while shoving the tiny child at me. The swarm of children aged between 2 and 12 kept touching me and what I can only imagine is appraising my clothes. This didn't really end until I had to raise my voice and go serious. I walked away and went back to the village where I was staying with a friend of mine at his distant relative's house. After telling our hosts the bizarre tale of attempted human trafficking, they proceeded to inform me that the child was most likely stolen from somewhere else in Romania. Another town most likely. It was apparently a local racket, reselling newborn kids to international tourists. What really gets me is the way in which they were telling this story, as if it was business as usual. P.S. Hosts were very kind, hospitable people, lead tough lives though. In Colombia around the elections this year, traveling from Pereira to Buga to visit the massive church there, cops there don't really pull people over, they just sorta stand on the road and wave people to the side. So they wave us to the side, ask for ID. I have my US license. Didn't think to bring my passport, also this was my second time visiting for a couple weeks and I never brought it anywhere the first time. So my girlfriend's dad has his and her Colombian IDs. I break out my NJ license. Cops take it and go back to talk. My girlfriend's dad tells us we're basically about to get shaken down. Cops come back and say that if we pay them 200,000 cop that we'll be able to pass. I'm like, duck no. Show them my police badge. Cops at their pants like, oh duck, this was a bad idea, and let us go on our way. In the 2-ish months I've spent in Colombia, that was legit my only bad experience. The country is amazing. 17-year-old me was in a public restroom near the Colosseum in Rome. I was taking a leak at a urinal when some dude rushed into the urinal right next to me, looked over the partition at my junk and he started jerking off extremely violently. I had just started and had to go something fierce, so I was trying to cover up, avoid jerking off, and not get pee all over myself. Suddenly the Roma police came bustling in and grab old boy and start yelling at me in Italian very loudly. As I zip up and throw my hands in the air I simply say English and American. They demanded to see my passport and then hauled off jerk off guy. 0/10 not a good experience. In 2016 I went to Brussels in a school trip. We were at the train station and we left to Germany, I believe. Several hours later all of our moms just start calling and texting us asking where we were and stuff. Turns out there was a bombing in the train station. It's crazy to believe that the bombs were probably already planted when we were there. We didn't actually got on a train. We were just visiting the station. What I came for, ghosts. What I got, kidnappings. I was drunk as hell in Tokyo, more like a suburb of Tokyo, and was having trouble getting back to the place I was staying at as nothing looked familiar and I was too sore to read the map properly, it being Japan. Someone came to my aid to try to get me home. Problem was, he didn't speak English, I don't speak Japanese, so he ended up going into a restaurant to ask for help. And we walked and there were 3 guys and a lady. All the guys were tatted up, which I knew was bad news. The guy immediately went to turn away and the lady yelled. The guy stood and grabbed him and the lady was pointing and yelling at me. I ducked the duck out of there and started running as fast as I could as I heard the man that was trying to help me yelling. I ran through every back alley and ditched my flip-flops along the way so they wouldn't make any sound. I eventually found my way back home and then left for the north the next morning. IDK, I highly doubt it was a Yakuza operation or anything like that, but I doubt it would have been good if I stuck around.